Hi, my name is Rob Stokes. I'm the CEO of Quirk eMarketing, and I've just delivered a lecture at USB Executive Education on the book Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. The book teaches us that whilst people are far less rational than we'd like to believe, this irrational behaviour can indeed be predicted and understood, allowing us to be better business people and marketers. The book essentially, the premise is that economists expect us to be rational, and the reality is that we're often not. In fact, I think the book goes so far as to say that not only are we more often than not rational, but we are not rational more than we are rational. And entire economic theory is based on many premises. I mean, if you look at the 8 conditions of perfect competition, which I shan't recite to you, but one of them relies on consumers and business owners being profit maximizers and rational decision makers, making decisions that are in the best interests of our utility and our lives. And this book, for me, was very eye-opening in conjunction with a few other books and abstracts I've read recently. About how humans behave, and I find it quite fascinating. It's one of those books that doesn't kind of leave you with one message, it leaves you with about 10. Each chapter deals with a different element of our irrationality. Here are your 2 options. This is my first experiment that could totally fail. You get to have a weekend in Rome with a free breakfast, or a weekend in Paris with a free breakfast. Hands up who's going with Rome. Okay, my experiment's already failing. Hands up who's going with Paris. I think that's the South African syndrome. Okay, let me try this again. Okay, you have now 3 options. A weekend in Rome with a free breakfast, a weekend in Paris with a free breakfast, or a weekend in Paris without a free breakfast. Hands up who's going with A. B. C, slightly arb experiment. The point of this experiment, which obviously in his case was done in a statistically significant manner, not in front of an open audience, was that the presence of this third option, albeit in a completely irrelevant option to option A, forces people to choose option B. Quite bizarre, but what it does is it gives humans that point of comparison. If you're in Europe and you're in the US, they're both very romantic cities, and the split tends to be about 50-50. As soon as you throw the 3 options up, everyone goes to Paris, because suddenly they're comparing against something which I'm sure you can appreciate is nonsensical. There's absolutely no difference in benefit with option B there versus option B there, but as soon as you add an irrelevant option C, it suddenly becomes meaningful. If I told you that the shop up the road that sells, what's a nice thing to buy? Let's say it just sells pencils. The shop up the road sells pencils for 20 Rand each, and the shop down the road sells pencils for 13 Rand each. Where are you going to go? You're going to go to the shop that sells pencils for 13 Rand. If I tell you the shop down the road sells suits for 500 Rand, and the shop on the other side of town sells suits for 493 Rand, are you still going to change your choice of shop to save the same 7 Rand? Probably not, because suddenly the relative saving becomes a lot less, and yet it's completely illogical, because in both cases you're saving 7 Rand, so the absolute saving remains the same. So I think the key thing for me on this point was about, as a marketer, to use relativity in one's offerings to the market. So McDonald's is very famous for the 3 pricing options, small, medium, and large, so everyone chooses the medium. And if you have a small and a large, people tend to get confused, and many people won't buy the chips in the first place. But when they can see that, no, that option seems like bad value for money because it's really tiny and costs this much. That option will make me fat. This option in the middle seems ideal. So a big lesson I learned there was about benchmarking your decisions against a constant factor. And the constant factor for me, but I think it varies for anyone, is my time. So what is your time worth per hour? And that will remain fairly consistent, or hopefully grow over time. And when you're making a decision, try and benchmark it against that rather than the options within your decision set, because it shall hopefully allow you to become a bit more neutral and make a better decision. Okay, so the fallacy of supply and demand. Supply and demand, economists tell us that it has a very strong relationship. Price becomes an inherent determinant of perceived quality. The reality is that Louis Vuitton bag is not that worth the thousands of rands that you pay for it, but with the LVH on the side, you feel like you've really got something of great power. But if it cost you 200 Rand and looked exactly the same, you probably wouldn't buy it. The other example, which all of us fall foul of, is herding. You go to the restaurant with the longest queue. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but you are basing your decision on people that have gone before you, but the reality is the people who have gone before you are also hurting. So it's quite common, particularly in big cities, for restaurants that open to just hire mock crowds for the first couple of days, get the queues out at lunchtime, and suddenly you're full for months to come because people perceive it to be good because there's other people there. But that's totally irrational. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I think to understand anchoring, when you understand anchoring, what it'll tell you to do is question the behavior that you tend to repeat and try and ask yourself, why are you repeating it? Is this behavior in my best interest? I think this one is a fairly obvious kind of rule, if you will, the cost of zero. The reality is that free doesn't obey market theory. If you look at consumption versus price, price goes down, consumption tends to go up, and it tends to be a fairly linear relationship. But as soon as you throw 3 into the equation, it tends to be a bit wobbly. So I'm going to try another experiment, and I'm probably going to fail. So I have the lint ball, and I have the marshmallow. Okay, and the lint ball is 10 cents each. The marshmallow costs 1 cent each. Hands up, who's buying lint balls? Hands up, who's buying marshmallows? Bit strange. Now I'm going to change the equation. The lint ball is 9 cents, and the marshmallow is free. Hands up, who's buying marshmallows? So hands up, who wants a marshmallow? Okay, once again, a few more hands, so you kind of supported my point. But you know, the reality is, in the experiments conducted, as soon as the cost fell to free, demand went up overwhelmingly. And yet, the practical difference in price is non-existent. As soon as you drop to free, demand shoots through the roof. And the reality is, when people see the word free, they make irrational decisions. They throw cost out the window as a consideration, because it has been thrown out the window as a consideration, but often there's a hidden cost. This is my favorite chapter, and it also kind of ties into a lot of the stuff that I am particularly interested in at the moment around what drives people to do stuff. And it's the concept of the social norm or the social contract. So the quote he uses in the book is that we're happy to do things, but not when we're paid for them, which just sounds absolutely bizarre. But the best example is this one. So you go to Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving dinner or whatever your denomination may be at the time, and beautiful family spread, kind of 15 people around the table, and grandmother's made this beautiful meal. Look at that turkey. Thank you, Google Images. And at the end of the meal, everyone's and satisfied, and you get up and you say, Mom, that was such a great meal. How much do I owe you for it? And how uncomfortable will that table be at that very moment? As soon as you throw money in it, you change that contract from a social contract, one of love, one of passion, to one of financial exchange. And it fundamentally changes the rules of the game. The next point was around the high price of ownership. So we fall in love with what we already have. It's often, as a marketer, your first gut instinct is to talk about benefits, and you need to talk about benefits. It's also worth noting the difference between features and benefits. Features are what's important to the company. Benefits are are those features described in the way that's important to the customer. But actually, customers are more driven by the fear of loss than the appreciation of gain. So if you reposition your offer to show them what they will not lose rather than what they will gain, you will often sell more product. This is an interesting one, the effective expectations. And they took a whole bunch of students and they offered them 2 types of beer. One normal beer and one normal beer with 2 drops of balsamic vinegar in it. On a blind test, when asked to say which beer they preferred, overwhelmingly they chose the beer with the balsamic vinegar in it. On a test when they were told, here's a beer with and without balsamic vinegar, overwhelmingly they chose the one without the balsamic vinegar. And even when they tasted both, they said the one without the balsamic vinegar was best. And yet when they tasted both and they didn't know which was which, they said the one with balsamic vinegar was best. So the point there is that expectation that vinegar, beer, bad combo, this is going to taste bad, fulfilled the reality. And yet the sweetness of that balsamic vinegar is the reason why people actually chose that beer. So the reality is that if these expectations deliver reality, then the assumptions that people make about you, and I think in this context about your business, we're at a business school, will influence the way they perceive your products and services. The next lesson is the power of price, which kind of plays into that. If it costs a lot, it must be worth something. I talked about the Louis Vuitton handbag. You pay thousands of rands for a handbag, a pair of shoes. If that same item cost 1/10 of the price, you probably wouldn't buy it. And that undermines everything that economics has ever said. where, you know, if price goes up, demand tends to decrease. But the reality is that it's not just a fashion item, it's a status symbol. The book talks a lot about placebos. So this is where the cattle prod comes in. So he jams these guys, electrocutes them, students, so you can, and offers them 2 painkillers to calm the burning in their side. One was 2 cents and one was $2.50. At first he offered to sell it to them. They all took the 2-cent one. Then he gave them, you know, you give this group the $2.50, this group. And the bottom line is the more expensive aspirin, because they were both identical, delivered far greater results. Oh, my pain's absolutely fine now, absolutely fine. I ate that sugar tablet and it's delicious. Because the perception was, well, that medicine costs 2 cents and that medicine costs $2.50, that must be better. And therefore I shall purchase it, and therefore it shall cure me. You know, we talk about placebos, and you know everyone knows what a placebo is, but how often do you think of how the placebo effect, beyond just medicine, but the placebo effect is influencing you in your life? And it kind of, you know, back to that power of price. You pay a lot of money for something, therefore you assume it must be better. And the last chapters is the context of our characters. So, how many of you have stolen a pen or pencil from work? Don't lie to me. Put your hands up right now. Now, if I say to you that that pencil costs 10 rand, and the reason why you've taken the pencil from work is because your kid needs a pencil, and it's a pencil, whatever. But if I asked you, would you go to the petty cash at work and take 10 rand out to go and buy a pencil, no one would put up their hands. One of you, 2 of you would still be lying. But no one would put up their hands, because the reality is that, and he proves this in the most remarkable ways ever in the book, that given the opportunity, most people are tempted to cheat. Thankfully, on many small things. And thankfully, when we're dealing with cash, we tend not to cheat. He did another experiment where he went and left Cokes in university dorms' fridges, which is a recipe for theft. 6 Cokes, 24 hours, they were all gone. $6 notes on a plate, 3 weeks later, they were all still there. So you're happy to take the dollar Coke and steal someone else's Coke, but you won't steal someone else's dollar. It's absolutely crazy. The final chapter is called Beer and Free Lunches. And this is a fascinating one. We've all seen this happen, and without realizing that we're seeing it happen. So once again, experiment in a pub, and he dressed up as the waiter this time. But what he did was, I'm trying to remember this, there was kind of 4 or 5 people around the table. And he ran experiments where he got them all to order. One set of people ordered out loud. The other set of people ordered by writing down their order. And then post the meal, he went and did the same satisfaction survey. Did you enjoy your meal? The ones that ordered out loud did not enjoy their meal as much as the ones who ordered quietly. Why? Because the ones that ordered out loud, so he'd have 5 people around the table, he'd have a menu of 5 items, and with amazing regularity, each of those items was chosen. So there wasn't 2 people getting the steak and 1 with the burger. So items A through E, 1 was being chosen of each. And because humans believe that being different is being better. But the point is that people are sometimes willing to sacrifice an obvious utility gain to adjust their perception of themselves in the eyes of others. And this kind of behavior is completely irrational. So behavioral economics is about economics based on how people actually behave rather than how we expect them to behave should they be rational. The reality is that understanding human behavior is not something that you ever achieve. But the more you can read and the more you can try and wrap your head around the various nuances of it, the more powerful you can become as a marketer. So guys, in summary, behavioral economics teaches us that whilst consumers are often rational, at least their irrational behavior can be predicted and indeed understood. And it's really been the beginning of a journey for me. I've read a lot of watched a lot of TED videos and read a lot of articles subsequent to reading this book. And well, the book itself, I'd give about a 6.95 out of 10. I think the principles and what it will encourage your mind to discover make it worth reading. So that is it for me. Any questions?